I think many found me provocative and also troublesome because I wouldn't bow my head. I think Nigel, Le Pen, Orban, Meloni, they've all been through the same.
So every leader of every political party that's Eurosceptic.
I remember one of them actually told me to jump out the window because of my views on migration. Denmark is an open country that should respectfully invite people, but also expect that these people being invited respect Denmark. Funnily enough, the left has been the less tolerant when it comes to meeting people with other views in this matter. If you are found with child pornography in the streets of Denmark, you can have maximum 1 year in prison. Now, if you are dishonest with the Quran or any other religious, you can be put 2 years in prison. I mean, yeah, I think it speaks for itself. For half a year, I was out of politics. I had to step down from my works and everything. I was
It had the desired effect.
Oh yeah. I was totally out. The question is, how big will the scars be until countries really face the realities that the dominant culture of a country must be the Judeo-Christian one that has been the leading one since the Roman Empire collapsed.
Information covered up, censorship, corruption. The mainstream media have proven itself to be untrustworthy. I'm here to give a platform for debate, for truth, for open discussion. I'm introducing you to my podcast, Silenced with Tommy Robinson.
Who exactly is Tommy Robinson, or Stephen Yaxley-Lane?
With the English Defence League, the EDL.
The problem is with Islamic
The English far-right Islamophobic activists.
Since then, there's been organised protests across the country in London, Manchester, Leeds. People in their thousands are marching for Robinson's cause.
There is no such thing in this country as a Muslim.
Free Tommy Robinson!
Morten Messerschmidt is a Danish politician and since 2022, leader of the Danish People's Party. At the 2014 European Parliament election, he was elected a member of the European Parliament for Denmark with close to 500,000 votes, the highest number of personal votes ever cast at a Danish election. With a strong focus on welfare for Danish citizens, immigration, national culture and opposition to the European Union, Morten Messerschmidt has faced a lot of pushback from the media and accusations of fraud and falsifying documents. He continues to fight hard for what he believes is best for the Danish people and Denmark's future. I am in Denmark's Parliament. I am here for my latest episode of Silenced, my podcast, and I am with Morten Messerschmidt. Morten?
Very good to meet you.
Thank you for meeting.
Again.
Yeah, thank you again. You last hosted me for the premiere of my podcast,
Right.
for my documentary, Silenced. And I'm here to find out more about yourself. Mm-hmm. I saw in 2008, I believe, you received the most votes any politician had ever received, and then you doubled that in 2014.
Well, something like that, yes.
So essentially, you are the most popular politician.
Well, it's almost 10 years ago. Popularity that has to swing, so it's not always the same.
No, it's ups and downs. So I wanted to find out more about who you are, basically. Sure. So I can give the viewers. Where you grew up in Copenhagen?
Just north of, actually, in a smaller village called Frederikssund. I grew up in I think, a very average family of working parents, and with 5 siblings. And then, I choose to go in the political direction. I got an academic degree as the first in the family for, I think, 5 generations or so. And now I live in Copenhagen with my girlfriend and family.
So now, what was your mum and dad's jobs?
Well, my mom worked at the local municipality in administration, local administration, and my father, he was a plumber.
Okay, plumber. Same as my dad.
Yeah.
And you left school and then you went to university. Did you have a good time at school?
Yeah, I did. I did. When I think in gymnasium, in high school, around midway through, the political interests came, and that of course sparked a lot of discussions with fellow comrades and so on, and that were not all of them agreeing with my views, but it never really led to any sort of conflict or something. So it was a good time. In university, I didn't have much time to be there, physically. I was more studying from home, doing all my political stuff on the side.
Okay, so what was it that got you interested in politics?
Firstly, it was the EU. I'm born in 1980, so around 92 we had the referendum on the Maastricht Treaty, and I felt that it was a bad thing for Denmark, and luckily we had this referendum where I think 52% of the Danes voted no, and that really sparked my political interest. And then shortly after, Danish People's Party was founded, and of course focused on many issues, among one EU criticism of migration from the Muslim world, and other issues. But those were in the beginning what I focused on.
And what year was the Danish People's Party founded?
95.
95, and you joined as the youth movement, am I right?
Yep. Well, I actually joined both the year after, I think, both in the Mother Party and the Youth Party.
And what was it the party was saying that was about the European Union or about migration?
Well, this idea that the Union would sort of harmonize all standards and social policies and border control, migration, all issues that I felt was Danish territory, and where loving Europe and the European countries, I certainly felt that Denmark had chosen another way, and we didn't want to be swallowed into this huge union. So it was on these issues. Animal welfare, I remember, was a crucial thing back then, where the standards certainly in Spain and other countries were quite different from what we were used to in Denmark. That would be harmonized by the Maastricht Treaty. So as a young guy here, 12, 13 years old, that was the issues that I felt most.
What was the Maastricht Treaty? Can you explain that?
Yeah, the Maastricht Treaty was when now we call it the EU, but there was a time when we called it the EEC, and it was a common market where independent states went together in order to do commerce together. And then in 92, after the Berlin Wall fell and all these things happened, there was a very strong driver to create a real union where we should have the union citizenship. We couldn't have the national border control and things like that. And that was all formalized in the Maastricht Treaty, also founding the euro as a currency of this union and building up to having a president and stuff like that.
Okay, and from your early involvement in these sort of politics, was it easy? Or did you come under attack? Was it something you could openly talk about?
The funny thing is, my mom was actually agreeing with me, but because she was a member of the Socialist People's Party, that was also Eurocritical at the time. They are not now; they're totally federalist now. But back then, they were against the Maastricht Treaty. So even though I was more center-right, we could agree on this matter. And the other pupils and my friends and stuff, they just felt it was fun to have a guy that would interest in politics. But the funny thing was the strongest reaction were among my teachers, especially in gymnasium high school, where I remember the first year when I wasn't really, declared politically interested. I wasn't a member of party. I had the best relationship with many of my teachers, but when I sort of came out of the closet and said that I would be a member of Danish People's Party, some of them wouldn't even talk to me.
Your school teachers?
Oh, yeah.
How old was you at this time?
I was like 16, 17.
16, 17?
Yeah, I remember one of them actually told me to jump out the window because of my views on migration.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what were your views on migration?
Well, that Denmark is an open country that should respectfully invite people, but also expect that these people being invited respect Denmark. And we could, at this point already, it's like, what was that, 25 years ago now, we could openly see that the migration from, in particular, the Muslim world was leading to many conflicts and problems in integration, labor market, crime, stuff like that, things that have just, been building on and being even worse today. At that time, we could see it, and I was quite outspoken about this, that we needed to limit the migration, if not even stop it from this part of the world.
And your teacher thought you should jump out the window for that.
Yeah, it's just one example that I remember, that he wouldn't listen to these xenophobic views. And
So this is going back 25 years, and you say, so the education system 25 years ago was already under the influence
I
of...
wouldn't say that the education system as such, but certainly many of the teachers, they were left-leaning. I think they still are today. And funnily enough, the left has been the less tolerant when it comes to meeting people with other views in this matter.
And having debates or discussions about it.
Yeah, no, they wouldn't even debate it. They were just, they were just turning their backs.
So this was at university, and then you left university?
I went to university, yeah, and while I was studying the law, I became member of parliament in 2005, which was the reason why my studies prolonged.
How old was you then?
I was 24.
So you become a member of parliament at 24 years old?
Yeah. I wouldn't recommend that.
Wouldn't you?
No, because firstly, I think for a politician, it's good to have your life under control, find out who you are, get your education, get a job, get
life experience.
Exactly. When I listened to some of the speeches I gave when I was 24, it's not all of them I would redo today.
Yeah.
So I think just as a piece of advice for many that want into politics in a young age, take it easy. You'll manage, but get some experience in life first. And then, of course, it took me way too long to get my education done. I didn't end until in 2009. So it's sharing time between work in parliament and then studying.
And what about I've read online about you face some problems from courts during this time.
Oh yeah. It's true. It began already before I got into politics, when we had in the youth movement back in 2001, we made a poster saying that there would be some severe consequences if we didn't stop the migration from the Muslim world, and for that we were convicted back then.
You were convicted for making a poster.
Oh yeah, we were. Two weeks of suspended jail in the youth movement back then.
And the poster simply said that
there was a picture from the some place in the Middle East with some Hamas students standing with the Quran and some blood on it, and from reality, it wasn't a picture that we invented. And then there was a picture of some Danish young girls. At this time, we had huge problems with mass rapes in Denmark of young Danish girls, and that was a big thing in the media. So it was logical for a youth movement that wanted to make a statement in this debate to make this contrast. And then we predicted that continued migration would lead to more rapes, more violence, more uncertainty, and things like that.
So the court convicted you, but would you say, sitting here now, with everything in hindsight that's happened, have you been proven right?
Well, no, it's been proven right. I mean, and I think if we made that poster today, well, maybe with the new legislation that this government is passing, I don't know, but today I think it would never come to the courts.
Because everyone accepts that that's what's happened.
Yeah, because people can see that it was regrettably true.
So how many years ago was this you wanted this with a poster?
This, I think, was 2001, 2002. So it's.
So if they would if people would have listened very early on, the amount of rapes, the amount of attacks, everything that's happened could have been avoided.
They were warned.
They were warned. Going back to this is longer than I said. I started my activism first in 2005 and then 2009. Mm-hmm. So this is taking it back even way before then. Mm-hmm. You were warning Denmark and Danes of what consequences could lay ahead.
Exactly.
But you weren't listened to.
No. And
in fact, you weren't listened to. You were silenced.
Well, some listened, in all fairness, because in 2001, politically, there was a change where the Danish People's Party gained, I think, around 10% of the votes, my party.
Yep.
And which, of course, sent shocks through Europe. Not least because at that time we managed then to be the foundation for a new center-right government consisting of 3 parties, and we actually managed to introduce some pieces of legislation that today have become more or less standard in Europe, but at that time were severely criticized by the 24 years old rule, for instance, that you need to be 24 years old in order to have family unification, that you need to have on average more connection to Denmark than another country. Things like that were introduced in order to limit we could tell at that time that many people from the Middle East here living in Denmark, turning 18, 19, suddenly got married with somebody who they'd probably never met from the whatever country in the Middle East where their family would come from, and then was family reunified to Denmark. And we wanted to stop that in order, firstly, of course, to limit migration through this part of the world, but also to protect the young person living here, giving him or her a chance to grasp Denmark instead of being forced into a marriage that they had no idea what would be.
Okay, and then you said the votes you got, there were 10%, and that was in 2010?
Around 10%, yeah. And
the next election from that, because I saw you got...
Then we began to grow gradually. And in 2005, I became a member of the Parliament group here, and I was very happy to be spokesperson on the European affairs. That was right around when the Federalists wanted to move on from the Maastricht Treaty I mentioned early on, with a real constitution for Europe. That was luckily stopped by the French and the Dutch that voted no in a referendum. Ironically, it's always the people that stop the insanity in Europe. The politicians, they just continue. But luckily, we have some countries like in Ireland and UK and other countries, France, Denmark, and so where we have these referendums. And in many cases, it's the people that put down their feet and stop the insanity. That also happened here.
And following on, so you had that first prosecution for the poster.
Yeah, that was 2001, and then I have two other encounters with the legal system that were more. They were both political, but they were of another nature. The first one that was in 2007. I was a member of Parliament, and there is Tivoli, which is an amusement park here in Copenhagen. When they open in the springtime, it's tradition that many people get there and gather and have some lunch and also some drinks. And I got a lot of drinks that day. And a week after or so, a newspaper said that I had been singing Nazi songs. And it all ended up with apparently some former social democratic minister having said that to the media, and I filed a libel case against this newspaper because it was false, and it totally fell apart, and it ended up with the chief editor being punished and so on. But it took a while, and being accused of these things, it's sort of the rumors is spread.
At this time, was you a rising politician as a young politician? Was you a threat? Would you say you were a threat to them? Because
I think many found me provocative and also troublesome because I wouldn't bow my head. I mean, I knew my stuff in the EU debate and migration debate, and I didn't accept the common arguments of Denmark being a granting or benefiting from migration. At that time, people spoke about cultural enrichments and stuff like that, which was evidently...
We've seen that now.
Yeah, false when it came to this part of the world. You could argue that, of course, from other parts of the Western civilization, Denmark has historically been enriched. I mean, Messerschmidt is not entirely a Danish name. I think I'm an 8th generation migrant from Germany, something like that. Yeah, but I feel that I have sort of integrated and pay my tribute to this country, which is much more than you can say for many of those coming from the Middle East.
So if you look at it now, you've got a politician who's lined up alongside the media. He's made allegations against you. The media have run those allegations around your whole country. I'm guessing they use that to beat you down. Nazi.
Absolutely.
Nazi.
It was on the front page of so many medias this summer, and it took a while. It took a year and a half.
And there was no truth in it. And then
absolutely
it's been proven there's no truth, but the damage is done.
Yeah. But the good thing was, at that night when we were having drinks and so on, I met my future girlfriend, and we're still together. So in the country of Hans Christian Andersen, something good has to come even out of bad times.
Okay, and is that now your partner, your wife?
Oh yeah. We've been together for more than 16 years.
16 years since that day.
Yeah.
Okay, and what does she do? Has she felt pressured from what you do?
Oh yeah. It's actually interesting because she's an actress, an artist. she's a cabaret singer, which might give you some different connotations,
Dutch
which is
folk is
but in a traditional way.
in Danish.
Yeah. Where we have north of Copenhagen another amusement park, not being Tivoli, but something equivalent. And her family has been there with roller coasters and stuff for 110 years. And among these things they run is a cabaret, and she's on the stage there. And so she has many friends in the cultural environment and so on. Many of them, of course, many of those reacted very, very negatively back then when we got together. But she was very clear.
Was it very negative back then because of what the media was saying about you?
No, just in general.
Okay.
That she could be with me, a center-right Euro and Islam critical politician. So their friendships stopped immediately, and she was very cool about it because she said that if they couldn't sort of see through me and see her, and it was her judgment, then they weren't real friends.
Wow. So yeah, her life's been affected.
Oh yeah, indeed. No, it's
and continued to.
It has, and I won't be lying saying that this was not one of the reasons why in 2009 then I accepted to run for the European Parliament, because being in Brussels sort of cooled everything a bit down. Because people don't recognize you in the same way in the street, and you have some more privacy, and that was nice after meeting in this very media-focused way in Tivoli and things like that, and then the court case, which we won, and it was nice then to have the idea of a more relaxed everyday life.
So you escaped as such.
Yeah, you could say
European
that, but also it also intrigued me and inspired me to continue my fight against the European Union and the system, and what had originally been the reason for me to join politics and wanted to spend my life on this. So it wasn't entirely that, but it was certainly a positive adjective to the word.
It had the adverse effect.
Exactly.
And you've had another court case, I believe.
Oh yeah.
So this becomes a common theme with anyone.
Well, I hope not. I hope not.
Yeah.
Three's enough.
Okay, so talk to me about the third case, please.
Well, yeah, but in the European Parliament you have the political parties as well, and many of the Euro-critical parties have been under huge scrutiny for misspending. And
Nigel Farage, I believe.
Farage, Orban, Le Pen.
Anyone who speaks out, they use the system.
All of them.
Okay.
All of them.
Yeah.
And therefore, in I think 2015-16, Olaf, which is the criminal investigation of the European Union, began an investigation of what was at that time the party to which Danish People's Party belonged, called MELD, the European Party for Liberty and Democracy. And which we shared with Nigel Farage, I think, at some point. But that was before this. Anyway, they come up with this accusation that we had a meeting in Denmark, which had costed, I think, 14,000 euros, and that EU hadn't played a sufficiently dominant role in this meeting, and that actually ended up at the court, and by that a farce began. Because firstly, at the the city court, what do you call it?
High court.
The first level.
Yeah.
I was convicted. Half a year of suspended jail.
And what would they have labelled that offence as fraud?
Fraud, yeah,
okay.
yes, because they said that the money
fraudulently receiving money.
Yeah, it had been a meeting that was entirely domestic politics, not EU. And therefore I was...
so they said you were using EU funds to deal with Danish People's Party politics. Okay.
Exactly. Then it came up that the judge, he was an outspoken critic of Danish People's Party and me. And good people that were fast on the internet found huge, tracks of discussions where he had been contributing his views on me, my person, my party.
You personally?
Oh yes, there was a very, very colorful debate about which mental disease I might be struggling with because of my views on EU and stuff like that, where he had been contributing.
So it's a very politicised judge.
Oh yeah. So we took this to the district court, to the next level, so to speak, and they made the first judge annulled, and it was cancelled. So everything had to begin again.
Was it cancelled then because he had a conflict of interest?
Yeah, exactly.
He had his own personal views and he allowed them to override the decision.
He should have stepped down and let somebody,
What year was this?
impartial. That was in 2021.
2021, yeah?
Yeah. So last year then.
Did the headlines, I'm guessing, again, the same as the
Oh,
previous
of course,
Nazi headlines? The plump.
No, not Nazi. No,
the previous ones.
This was
similar.
just now. I was just a fraud,
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it all began again last year, in December 2022, and then at this time they stood up with 5 judges just to make sure that there wouldn't be any problem on personal interests and stuff like that, and I was totally acquitted with 5 judges to 0. So and then afterwards the prosecutor chose not to take it
Any further to appeal it.
exactly, and I was totally cleaned, or what do you say?
Yeah, exonerated. But
Yeah.
for 4 years,
7 years from the start.
for 7 years, you had cases hanging over you and
Yeah.
the media running the smears.
The
that you were
media played a
fraud.
huge role in this. Actually, I think if the EU system hadn't been leaking all these details and all these materials to the media, it would never have become a court case, because the prosecutor was under a huge pressure. I mean, when the media for so many years have been building up that there is a case and this politician has been a fraud and spent money wrongly and so on, even the prosecutor and the public system, if they had not been taking this to the court, then they had to explain why all the media were wrong. And I think for them, it was just the easy way out then to try to play it. They were then lucky to get an impartial judge that would just look for the reason to convict me in the first place. And then when we got to the real court case, it showed up that there was nothing.
Was that, can I ask, going through those years, 7 years of court, was it pressurising?
Oh yeah, it actually got to me physically. I had to, for half a year, I was out of politics. I had to step down from my works and everything. I was
It had the desired effect.
Oh yeah. I was totally out. So it's
Is that for you and the family?
absolutely, it was very, very unpleasant for all the family. If it hadn't been for my family and my girlfriend, and of course, then I think I could not have been taking up a real job again. But they inspired me. They got me to believe and understand that I did nothing wrong, and they gave me the motivation to fight back and accept that, okay, we just need to fight.
So a less strong character could have been beaten at that point, because essentially what I describe all this as lawfare. You've gone through 3 examples now. One where you've been proven right, another one where a politician fed the media to lie, and the country, and then your name was destroyed. And then secondly, it seems like media pressure, again, nothing to do with justice or the law.
Absolutely.
Media pressure. And all because, what would you say the reason for this was? I'd say they see you as a threat because you're a charismatic leader. That's what. But what would you say? Because of your views against the European Union, or,
no doubt.
and immigration.
It's well, I think both. But on this matter, it's been the EU. I mean, it's so clear that all the political parties, all groups in the European Parliament have the political parties, and we know that all pay money back because some meetings are assessed whether to be too much in the one direction or in the other, and so on. But it's only when it comes to the Eurocritical parties that it gets into the media. And I mean, it's so openly what they're doing. It's so evident what they're doing that it's undeniable in my view.
Do you see similarities here with what's happened to you with any other of the Eurosceptic politicians that you've dealt with in Europe?
I think Nigel, Le Pen, Orban, Meloni, they've all been through the same.
So every leader of every political party that's Eurosceptic.
And that's, even though that you might be acquitted and it ends up with, okay, there was nothing really in it, or enough of these cases still brings to an image where the average voter, being not entirely down in every detail, say, all right, okay, he might be some, in some way crooked. He just got off the hook in some way. So that's why I answered your question, the first question, as I did, because I might, for 10 years ago, have been the one getting most votes. But, with all this...
Okay. So 10 years ago, you get the most votes.
Yeah.
Since then, you're labelled and smeared by media continuously.
Exactly.
People who Google your name, like anyone can Google your name, and you'll read all of
first thing
it's still all there.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's damage is done.
It is.
And you're still fighting that.
Yeah, but we are. That's I think the important thing, that we are fighting, and we will always be doing so. So it's this is a travel getting back on the track, and we are actually doing well for the party now.
You're doing well again now.
Oh, we are.
Because would you say the party, when Angela Merkel opened up the borders, which was what, 2015?
15, yeah.
When she opened up the borders, at that time in Denmark, where were the Danish People's Party?
Well, that was a defining moment, because Danish People's Party was the biggest center-right party at the time. We had a center-right government being supported by my party. I was in Brussels, though, but the leadership here was very influential. And, to be frank, at this moment in history, failed. I must say, it's not, I took over the leadership a little less than 2 years ago, and I've decided I won't look back. I don't want to criticize too much.
Okay.
But it was a failure that back then we didn't close the border. We have in EU, we have something called the Dublin regulation, which means that if you want to apply for asylum in the EU, you must do it in the first secure country where you are. All these people were in Germany, and they should have not been let into Denmark. But sadly, I think between 14 and 50,000 Syrians were accepted into Denmark, and many of them still here. And now, of course, fighting to stay, even though that for most of them it will be perfectly safe to return to Syria.
Okay, so but that was before your leadership. You're now the leader.
It was,
of
yes.
the Danish People's
And that's
Party.
been one of the big things. I think it very often is that when you get a new leadership, to redefine what is the project, and also to say, okay, which failures have been committed in the past, and confirm for the voters that we have learned from this. This led to a split of Danish People's Party, where the previous leadership went into a new party, a more liberal party, along with the liberal minister of migration at that time, who was in charge when so in that sense you could say that
Would you say the party was infiltrated?
Not infiltrated. It was.
If you look at the lengths they're going to, the European Union, Eurosceptic parties, if you look at the lengths they're going to silence anyone to do with immigration, would they come within parties?
We got into a wrong track.
Okay,
that was the problem, and you could say that those who got into the wrong track at the time, they took the consequence of it and left the party, and now have more openly said that they are not Euro-critical anymore. They are not, as such, Islam-critical anymore. For instance, they favor to have mass migration as long as people have a job and things like that, whereas I'm much more concerned about the long-term impact of the country if you don't have a focus on Danish culture, Danish language, and things like that. So, but at least they took the consequence of their changed minds in politics and left the party to join another.
So now the party's under your leadership more, and what is the biggest threat to Denmark?
I think it's a mix still of migration from the Middle East and the EU enforcing this migration. And you
don't have control of.
No, not at all. I mean, we do have opt-outs on the Justice and Home Affairs, but it's not as safe as it should be. For instance, we need still to apply gradually in order to have our border control, whereas the UK, for instance, has a more clear possibility. You don't really use it, but you do have an opportunity.
Since Brexit?
Well, actually, also before, but still, I think it's evident that the UK government doesn't do anything enough in order to protect your borders. But I mean, that's your area. I'm focused on Denmark, and and we don't have the efficient border control that we should have. We also have many holes now in our National Migration Act because of EU regulation that should never have applied to Denmark, because we have our opt-out back from the Maastricht Treaty. So in that sense, migration and EU are interlinked cases and problems for Denmark.
Because you can't deal with the migration because the EU wouldn't allow you. They actually tell you who's coming in and how many are coming in.
Exactly, and as long as the EU doesn't even want to help Italy, Greece, and some of the Mediterranean southern countries to protect their borders, this is a problem also impacting Denmark. When people get into Italy, it's not their dream country to be in. They want to go where the welfare states are massive, and that's Denmark, Sweden, Holland, and so on.
Would you say these are asylum seekers?
That's what they claim.
But you disagree with that, would you? Obviously, some are.
Well, we know from statistics that the vast majority of these should not have asylum.
Economic migrants.
They are coming for a more comfortable life, and I don't blame them, because looking at the conditions that their own countries provide. But two things have to be said. Firstly, if you don't like the countries that you're fleeing, then don't bring the culture that created the conditions in these cultures. Embrace what is the world history's best societies ever, namely the West. And so many of them don't. I mean, what we've seen here in Denmark and in many of the Western European countries is that Muslim migration come here and then insist on our societies to change in order to gradually become what they actually fled from. That's the first thing. And secondly, we cannot help those people really in need by these policies where so many that are coming for economical reasons apply for asylum. They make the system that should actually help those really in need, they are such a huge burden to that it disables our possibilities actually to help people that are in need. So we have to change these policies and focus on the areas in the world where the need is the biggest, and then help there instead of believing that they should just continually come here.
You talk about they want our countries to change when they come here. Your country is about to change.
It is changing.
Has it changed for the better? Would you say? Is there?
I would not say, but if you, I'm born in 1980, and it was not a paradise in 1980. I mean, if you could easily get your ass kicked in the streets if you got in the wrong neighborhood or whatever. But today, if you get in the wrong neighborhood, you don't get your ass kicked. You might be killed.
Raped.
Raped, or it's an entirely different level of violence, of brutality that we see in Denmark, and that I think is impossible to deny has clear linkage to the many of the migrants coming here. Gangs of young Arabs making the streets unsafe for not even only for girls and women, but also for just young people not thinking brightly and walking maybe home alone in the night, and then being spotted by these packs as a victim. And they don't just take your wallet and slap your face. They will jump on your head. They will kick you. They will be
is this something that's
insanely cruel things.
Is this something that's become common practice for many Danes now in Denmark at the hands of the migrants that are welcomed in?
It is, and it's of course many migrants, and we have to say that for whatever reason that so many have loved Denmark, and that's fine. But it cannot take focus on these very, very brutal gangs that we see around in not only Denmark but most of Europe. But that's just comparing one thing from my childhood, how things have changed through these 30-40 years. Then of course you will see that suddenly you will have the Muslim scarf, hijab, and whatever, all over the country. That impacts, of course, the behavior of many girls, because it sends a signal that only by wearing that you are clean, you are to be protected, you are to be cherished.
This is to do with Islamic teachings, because many
You
there's
will have
verses in the Quran.
young girls not wearing the headscarf that will be spat at, or in other ways, bullied and things like that.
That's happening now in Denmark.
That's happening now in Denmark. We have parallel, informal Sharia courts where young people that, if they want to get divorced, if they have issues, will go there instead of going to the real courts that enforce the Danish law, things like that. So this is impacting the culture.
And the victims there will actually be the Muslim girls who
It'll be the Muslim girls, yes, and again,
who are born in Denmark.
Exactly. And as I said before, I don't think you can find any place in world history where it would be better to be born than in the West around our time of birth. I mean, around now. The amount of equality, wealth, prosperity, possibilities, free education, things like that, it's second to none. Not only on the world surface today, but in world history. And why is it then that people come from countries that are evidently developed in a less attractive way? Because if not, then why would they?
Why are they here?
Why would they come? Why do they then insist on bringing a culture that has created these so dramatically different societies?
Do you allow in Denmark Saudi Arabia's funding to be used for mosques?
I think yeah.
Iranian?
Yeah.
So totalitarian regimes.
I will tell you a funny, or more, maybe not funny, but just a piece of fact. When the Social Democratic government ran for office in 2019, and successfully so, they had a full program where they tried to copy some of the policies of the Danish People's Party. One of them was that they wanted to ban funding from specific countries, naming Saudi Arabia, Iran, and these more radical Islamist countries. Now, speaking here, no countries have been banned, only one person. They have found one person who I believe have 12 or 13 cousins that he could easily, use as a middle person to if he wants to send money in here. So we have huge problems. And for instance,
so they run on a campaign to promise to do this, to pull votes away from probably the Danish People's Party.
Yeah.
And then they haven't implemented any of it.
No, they haven't even tried. I even presented the bill in Parliament, copying the text from their program, saying we should enforce this, and they voted no to their own.
They voted no to their own policy, but that was just a facade.
Exactly,
we were using that.
But the real thing, the real problem for us, I think, is actually not Saudi Arabia or Iran. They are as well, but the big thing right now is Turkey, and
because they're threatening you.
Because they are using
your country as well.
They are using the mosques for social control of the Turks in Denmark.
Which they've done in Germany for decades.
I think it's not only a Danish phenomenon. They've done it all over Europe, apparently. But they have this Diyanet, the Turkish Ministry for Religious Affairs, that then send out the imams and the people that are being, working at the mosque. And they work very closely with the embassy of Turkey. And then they report if they have Turks, and there are many Turks in Denmark. Many also very well integrated. And so if people are too well integrated or behave in a way that Erdogan doesn't like and things, then it's reported from the mosques to the embassy and then back to Constantinople.
So he's running his own sort of policing force within Denmark.
Absolutely.
Not just that. You're about to go into Parliament. There's about to be a
we have at what's the time? An hour or so. Yeah. The government is introducing a new shameful piece of legislation, which is not only reintroducing the ban on blasphemy, which we almost unanimously abolished 6 years ago, but is now even widening the scope of statements against religious artifacts that would be criminalized.
What's the reason for this?
We've had some very isolated but very active groups of people on the right wing that have been traveling around burning the Quran and making provocative statements, and that, for various reasons, had become to the Islam fascist government's awareness in the Middle East. And one should think that they had another plate, dealing with all the matters down there. But they are now very concerned about these Quran burnings in Denmark. And sadly, we don't have a government that would just say the obvious.
Free speech.
We don't fancy burning stuff, but we allow it. That's all what they should say. We have free speech, and that also contains, speaking and manifesting things that you might not like. And by the way, it's created, as I said before, the world's best society. Try to look at yourself. You don't have free speech. See where you are. That's what they should have said. But instead, they have bowed their heads.
And which countries is this putting pressure on?
I think it's mostly, as you mentioned before, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Iran, Turkey, certainly. They have a union of some
the Islamic, the OIC.
OIC, yeah.
This is a block of Islamic countries that come together, and when they want to put, whether it be political trade, trade pressure, any pressure, they use that to influence the host country. So they've been using that to threaten Denmark, threaten Sweden, that they need to ban these citizens who are exercising their freedom of speech.
And the funny thing, or the sad thing, depends on from where you see it, Denmark and Sweden are not at all the only countries in the world where these manifestations are legal. Take the US, I think even the UK, Netherlands, many places you can do this, because I think you can argue that one of the most core elements of Western civilization is the ability to critique religion. Back in the Reformation, I mean, there were many harsh critiques of the Catholic Church. That was sort of the foundation for the Renaissance and the development of where we are today. So say that you should limit these critical approaches to religion, in my view, is very contrary to what has been Western civilization. Even though I personally don't fancy to burn things, Qurans or any other things, I think it's a bit primitive. I can easily argue against Islam without burning it.
I agree. I think you should read it.
Exactly. But people should have the right to even do things that the majority find stupid. That's the idea of free speech.
Fundamental free speech.
Yeah.
Would you? Okay, so the law that they're going to pass, or they're looking at passing, will make it illegal. You will carry a 2-year prison sentence. Is that something that, as a politician, you're going to fight against?
Oh yeah. For many reasons. Firstly, originally the government said that they would, very precisely go against only burning the Quran. Now they are banning any improper dealing with religious artifacts, which can be basically anything. And it's not only artifacts from recognized religious foundations and movements. It can be anything.
Would that include, say, for example, in the Quran and within Islam, it talks about the execution of homosexuals. So if someone took a pride flag and wrapped the Quran in a pride flag, could that now carry a 2-year sentence under this legislation?
Most likely. I don't know whether it will carry a 2-year sentence, but it could certainly be a felony.
It'll be a felony.
Yeah.
So they're taking away. So
I think many of the even artistic contributions to the political debate we've had in the recent years would be included. For instance, there's a Danish artist called Jens Galschiøt. He made a very provocative picture. I didn't like it myself, but I respected his right to do it, of Virgin Mary with a child in her stomach being crucified, as a manifest against the Catholic Church and their views on abortion. Okay. I think that will be illegal in the future in Denmark. And then you mentioned the level of punishment. Just to put it into perspective, if you are found with child pornography in the streets of Denmark, you can have maximum 1 year in prison. Now, if you are dishonest with the Quran or any other religious, you can be put 2 years in prison. I mean, I think it speaks for itself.
And you had recently in Iran, Muslim women who have been fighting for their freedom, have been taking off their hijabs and burning them because they're forced to wear them. So these are the real feminists who are fighting. I believe you've had a Iranian woman in this country who has also. She's a brave lady who's burned her hijab.
Firuza Basraf Khan.
Could she face prosecution then? If this law's passed, would that Muslim feminist or that feminist Muslims who are fighting against oppression?
I think it will certainly be tried at the courts. Whether she'll be convicted or not, I don't know. But she has been, dismantled. How do you say? Tearing the Quran apart, not burning it. But that's been one of her manifestations. Ripping it apart, and that'll certainly be
a crime.
And that's one of her ways as an artist to speak out against the Iranian totalitarian regime. which I think she's been doing in very interesting, also beautiful, sometimes maybe more primitive ways. But that's the idea of being an artist, and having
challenging. You're making
the
people think.
ability to try to move in some areas, and not always should be navigating whether is this legal or not legal. Shall I now spend 2 years in jail or shall I not? I mean, that's the idea of freedom. That sometimes you do something which is brilliant, and sometimes you do something that is not.
I've done that a few times.
Oh yeah, don't we all?
What about so if they pass this law, and am I right that the Danish government have accepted the reason they're bringing in this legislation is because they're scared?
Yeah,
they believe it's now a matter of national security.
They are in that sense. They are totally open. I have compared them with Chamberlain. There's this famous moment in 1938 before World War II really
comes
starts.
back and it's all sorted.
Yeah. He says peace in our time and things like that. And Churchill approaches him and says, "Okay, Mr. Chamberlain, you had to choose between dishonest and the war, and you choose to be dishonest, and then you will have the war upon you." And he was perfectly right. And the same thing happened here. In a smaller scale, but our foreign affairs minister, he came out with this piece of legislation and thought that he could appease the Islam fascists in the Middle East, and just a few days after, Al Qaeda said that they would now have more focus on Denmark and try to see if they could do terrorism here. So you can't reason, you can't appease these people. The only thing you can do is to find common ground with other freedom-loving countries and defend freedom.
How are we still sitting there thinking we can appease them? How is anyone sitting this many years on believing you can appease the fascists?
Yeah, exactly.
But so who decides the law in Denmark? Terrorists are now deciding what your legislation is, essentially.
The sad thing is that
because they've accepted the reason they're doing it is because of their fear.
It's 3 days ago we celebrated the 80th anniversary of the day when, during the Nazi occupation, the government stepped down, collaborating with the Nazis. So imagine that, celebrating that did happen 80 years ago, and then now having a new government that is taking dictation from these regimes. And not only that, I mean, they have even been working. There is something called the Muslim Union in Denmark, which is sort of a common umbrella organization for all the mosques and Muslim organizations and stuff. The Justice Ministry have been having meetings with them, organizing how these limitations of free speech should be. So
they're dictating. This is how it's going to be.
They're totally open in their defeat and accepting the violence or the threats of violence to now be the reason for limiting free speech.
So would you say this is the end of free speech for Danes coming, possibly?
Was not the end of free speech in that sense, because but it's certainly a big attack against it. As I said, 2017, we almost unanimously in Parliament abolished the ban on blasphemy. Now, if they had just reintroduced that, you could say, all right.
But they're going further.
But they have gone even further. And that is what I think troubles me the most, because then what's next?
That's the question.
Yeah. It always is.
They're focusing on Denmark.
Yeah.
Do you believe that if Denmark bring in this blasphemy law, do you believe then Sweden, then Norway, then Britain? Do you think there'll be pressure put from the OIC on all of these countries? If they can make one fall, make them all fall.
I think it's impossible to see any other consequence, because if they have had now the Danish government to bow, then they just move on and say, okay, if you don't do the same, then the threats will be on you. And then when they have the same legislation in all the previously freedom-loving countries, they will come back to us and say, okay, now what's next step? I mean, these organizations have already said that there also needs to be a clear ban on the hijab insult, for instance, which we don't really know will be a part of this
criticism of the hijab.
Yeah, or burning it or whatever,
okay.
like the Iranians,
like the Iranians
are doing. Yeah, so it's certainly never stopping here, and that I think is a learning from Chamberlain and Hitler.
And that will just continue to criticism of Muhammad. There's so many things that Islam dictates. We are pandering to Sharia law. We're pandering to take the freedoms of our own people.
These regimes are founded just as profoundly as you and I and the Western civilization are on freedom. These regimes are founded on banning freedom, on limiting freedom. That's what Islam is about. Subjection. That there should be only the wise people knowing the Quran that dictate society, limiting the freedom. So that's what they want. That's what Islam. That's the reason why the Islamic world, socially, economically, politically, has stalled. And that's what they want.
I believe the threat level to Denmark is the highest it's been at currently. Do you think you are facing the threat from terrorism? Do you think it's a real threat?
I think we have for some years. Since the cartoon.
The Danish
crisis.
Cartoonist?
Yeah.
Talk to me about the Danish
Well,
cartoon.
back in 2005, there was a book coming out about the life of Muhammad, a sort of popular one, also making fun with parts of the Quran and so on. And the author wanted to have caricatures in the book, but nobody dared. Nobody wanted to contribute. They were afraid of what would the reactions be. So the Danish daily Jyllandsposten at that time then invited famous caricature drawers to contribute. And 12 of them wanted to, and they printed it. And that, of course, led to a big issue in the Middle East, where Denmark was then under threat and stuff like that, because we had been, or not we, but these cartoonists have been depicting Muhammad and apparently thereby violating some rule in the Sharia.
Punishable by death.
Yes, like Salman Rushdie and like anybody else who stands out for freedom and speaks against Islam, that they will be under threat for fatwas, and thereby anybody. There was even a couple of years ago, Salman Rushdie in New York was.
They got him. They stabbed him in the neck.
Yeah.
At the end,
and a young guy that he wasn't even born at the time of this fatwa, and I think that shows how strong an impact this has in some parts of the Muslim community.
I met someone yesterday whilst I was here, a gentleman called Rasmus, who was under 24-hour guard by Danish authorities due to threats to his life.
Yeah.
In fact, he seemed like he was living in a prison after.
I assume.
There's no freedom left for him, so his democratic rights have been taken.
Yeah.
Talk to me. And okay, so can I ask you about? There's a huge election coming up in America.
I know.
Can I ask you? Have you got your eyes on it? Have you had your eyes on it? Do you think the American situation affects us here in Europe? What's your views of the current?
I'm actually a bit saddened what's happening in the US. I think it's very colorful. It's very funny, but it's not really the burning torch of freedom anymore. It's not inspiring as it used to be. I grew up. I think we grew up in the 80s.
Yeah, 82.
With Reagan, and then afterwards with Clinton, and it's difficult to compare. I think European and U.S. policies. It's two very different systems. But now, even though I think Trump is funny and in his way addressing some of the issues that I think should be addressed, but doing it in a way that might not be the best way. And then Biden on the other side. I mean, they are polarizing, both of them, polarizing the American democracy, which I think is essentially sad to be witnessing.
Do you think there's been a problem with the last election?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I cannot.
No, not involved.
No.
Enough. Okay. Can I ask you about what would you say in your whole of your life has been your most worst moment?
My worst moment?
Yeah.
I think that was I have two. The one, losing my sister. She was killed by her boyfriend, and that happened 4 years ago.
4 years ago.
Yeah.
How old was your sister, if you don't mind me asking?
She was 31, yeah, and left 4 children. That is now with us in the family.
With yourself?
Not with me, with my mom, with our common mom.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that was a very, very dark moment, of course.
How old were her children?
Sorry?
How old were her children?
They are 3, 4, 12 and 15.
Oh, wow.
So it's a big span. And of course, yeah, it impacted the entire family gravely. I was a big brother. I am the big brother of 6.
Oh, you're the eldest of 6?
I am, yeah. So that was probably the darkest moment. Another, and that's why I say 2, is that almost 10 years ago, my girlfriend's youngest daughter, she has 2 daughters from previous relationship, was in a car crash and had a severe brain trauma. And she's living and she's doing well, but she is not the same person anymore. And this having a young person that you love in your life, and then just seeing them severely handicapped and changed physically and mentally, and still having them in your life as a person you love as a child, that's also a very rough thing
to watch.
Yeah. So these 2 episodes, I would say.
And that must have been a hell of a... So to deal with that, because I understand the pressures of talking about the issues we talk about, but to have those 2 experiences go on in your
politics,
life.
I could, if the day when I get fed up, I can, with good conscience, say, now I'm going to do something different. I've done my share.
You've done enough.
Yeah, I think I could do that. I'm not at all there now, but and then leave it to somebody else. But these things, when some you love, some in your family get taken away from you in brutal ways, in unexpected ways, impacting not only their lives but many people's lives, you can't escape from that. You can't just say, I'll choose another path. So these are the real things that you need to deal with in your heart. And
Can I ask what happened with your sister?
Yeah, my sister, she was born in 8 years after me. She was my first little sister, and she.
What's her name? What's her name?
Lina.
Lina.
And where I, from the very beginning, was very engaged and had a lot of energy and stuff, she was more introvert. She had a more difficult time in school, difficult getting friends, things like that. And so when she got out of school, she didn't get, the friends nor the boyfriends that would be the best.
Yep.
And she got 2 kids with 2 different guys. Didn't work out. And then she met this guy, and she was really insisting to show that this time was right. This time she could make it work, be a real family and stuff. And they got 2 kids, in a very short time period between them. And we didn't know that he was violent against her. And she was too proud to say, because it was, again, another failure for her, I think. And then one night, in November 2019, she told him that she wanted to leave him. And he stabbed her with a kitchen knife. And then he took his car after having killed her and drove to his ex-girlfriend and also killed her. So he killed 2 girls in that night and made 5 children orphans.
So the 4 kids, so the children lost their mum and their dad.
Yeah.
And not just that, they have to live with the fact that that's their dad.
Yeah. He's now in prison, of course, for life.
Life, as in never will be released?
Well, we hope not. There was also a fight in the courts. I just didn't want to mention before because it's something different. But first time he got a jail time limited to 16 years, which means he will get out around 10 years after.
He'll get out after 10 years after stabbing.
Yeah. That was the first. And then we appealed. And then he got lifetime, which means he will be there at least for 16 years. And that's, for me, life should be a life after doing this. But what for us has been important is that he at least will be there until all the children are adults, are 18. So, but...
is that something you'd fight for now as a politician?
Absolutely.
To fight for the fact that anyone who takes...
I even presented the bill down in Parliament that if you are a double killer, You should never get out of prison.
Ever?
Yeah, it was not passed. But
And did he stabbed your sister, and then he broke into his ex-girlfriends and stabbed them both?
Yeah, killed them both. So that was
That was recent.
Yeah, it's 4 years ago.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So, but the good thing is that the kids are doing well. They are, of course, scars, luckily only on the soul, but they're doing good. School, friends, family.
You close with them all?
Yeah,
That's
as
good.
close as you could be with teenagers.
Of course.
They think I'm awfully dull when they get.
They think you're awfully dull.
Yeah, boring.
Really, you're the leader of Danish People's Party.
They
Most
couldn't care.
flamboyant
I mean,
politics.
they couldn't care less. They no. When they come, they visit us in weekends and stuff, and I say, okay, shoot, what museum would you like to go to? And what they just want to sit with their iPads, or maybe they want to go to Tivoli or the amusement park and stuff.
Of course.
But no, but it's fine. I love them all, of course, and I miss my sister, but I'm glad to have them more in my life.
Yeah, to have part of her.
Yeah.
What do you see as then just where we're at now in Europe? Why would you say, with everything that's happened across Europe, with terrorism, with the threats, with violence, with the rapes, which we've seen common across the UK from Muslim gangs, why would you say our borders are still open in such a way? What's the purpose of that? It's not good for Europe. We know that. Any basic person can look and think, this isn't good. What's the reason that our borders are being kept open?
I think there are many, or there are at least some. Yep. Firstly, of course, you have some that are just ignorant and think that a culture of a country is not impacted, and they don't see the catastrophic consequences that you and I see. Maybe they live in comfortable homes, in comfortable areas, with comfortable lives, and are not faced with this, the realities as we have talked about, because they are indeed, in some parts of the countries where many people maybe have less income, lower incomes and things like that. So they can just turn the blind eye and be morally, above. Then we shouldn't ignore that many in the industry just love to have an influx of migrants that will put pressure on wages and pressure on the labor market.
To bring down the wage.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and these are people that also, of course, live comfortable lives and so on. And then I think one of the problems we're facing now is that a new generation is growing up having never experienced anything else. I mean, they don't know how it was to live in a country where they don't have these problems of crime or open racism against the Europeans, or where the headscarf is not a part of everyday life, and what impact does that have on the rights of both sexes and things like that. That's, of course, and maybe that's even on the long term the greatest threat, because European culture is now changing. And if people don't understand what they are losing, of course, then how should they react? So I think there are many reasons, and then there are legal issues. Of course, you have a huge pressure on this system called the International Conventions, written back in the 50s, right after the horrendous World War and the consequences of that entire period in the 30s, where it made sense, of course, to write into international conventions that everybody has the right to family life and stuff like that, but which is nowadays then being interpreted in any migrant coming here has the right to family life, which means bring the family here. So these international conventions from another time are being now abused in order to facilitates the migration.
Yeah. And how long would you say Europe has before it's changed beyond?
Well, if you have to be optimistic, then Europe has been through difficult times. also difficult times of migration. I mean, now I speak on a 2,000-year perspective, and has still prevailed and has still, managed to get through. So I think we will manage. But the question is, how big will the scars be until countries really face the realities that if you want the best societies also in the future, the best universities, the best possibilities, wealth and stuff like that, equality of the sexes, all these issues, fundamental liberal societies, then the dominant culture of a country must be the Judeo-Christian one that has been the leading one since the Roman Empire collapsed 1600 years ago, and that I think is gradually becoming recognized, even in some of the older parties. But it's going to take many years, tens of years, until the policies will be where they should be.
Would you? When's the next election in Denmark?
Well, now domestic elections will probably not be until 3 years, because the present government is doing so poorly that they will never call for election. So that will be, I think, in 3 years until something happens. But next year we have European elections, and which I very much look into. I'm not going to run myself.
You're not?
No, I'm perfectly.
Is that
happy.
because you're happy here now?
I'm happy here, and I have a very, very good candidate, and then we'll see what happens.
How many are you fielding for the European elections?
Fielding?
How many people do you have standing?
Oh, we have a list of 20 candidates.
Okay.
So we'll see.
Morten, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise.
I'd like to thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, and thank you for what you're doing as well. It's very, very important for all the matters we've been talking about.
Thank you very much, and I wish you luck in whatever your next election, and your nieces and nephews. I send my love.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you very much.
Carry on watching for more interesting guests. I'll talk to anyone. I'll debate anyone. I'll hear anyone's story. If you want to help me along that way, it's not free. I need your support. If you can support my family, that gives me my peace of mind. It means I can continue to do the work I do. You can do so at www.supporttommy.com. I appreciate every bit of support, as do my children. It gives me the ability to fly them out here to see me so I can stay in constant contact with them. I'm deplatformed and I'm censored, so I need you. I need you to share this content, and make sure you stay tuned for upcoming weekly guests, interesting guests, exciting guests. I'm Tom Robson, and this has been my podcast, Silence.